Today, I have the Bluesky Chief Operating Officer, Rose Wang. She is talking to me today about the growth of the platform, among other things that we're going to discuss. Rose, thank you so much for making time to chat today.
Hey Chris, so glad to be here.
So I'm looking at the counter right now. There's a website I'm looking at, blueskyusers.theo, and it's showing the user count. More than 20 million people are using Bluesky according to this website. Isn't that an accurate number?
There are more than 20 million accounts created, and we've had about 1 million new users join every day the last 7 days.
Yeah, so I've seen that, and there's a chart that I look at as well that kind of shows the amount of people liking as well. How are you feeling? Because that kind of growth in that time frame, because I know months ago it wasn't quite at that number, but there's just been a surge recently. How are you feeling?
I I said to you before the call started that I'm feeling many things. We as humans are complex, and so I would say that the overwhelming feeling is just excitement. This is just I think it's super validating to see that what we've been building for over the last 2 years that prioritizes user choice resonates with people, that this is what they want. But I also think that there are very few people in the world who've experienced this type of skill this quickly. And so in some ways, you want to be able to look at someone and say, what do I do? And there's no one really to look to. It's our team of 20 that is holding it together. And we have had no significant downtime with so many people coming on. And so I think we're just really proud of ourselves. But of course, I think we're quite tired.
Now, I was about to say, be honest with me, because that kind of growth, it can be daunting, especially trying to scale up and have enough hands to deal with all of this. Is that kind of a challenge and a little tiresome in terms of trying to address?
It's always hard when a company goes through hyperscale, but in some ways, it's it's a known problem in the sense of we know where systems will break. And so the first one is infra. We want to make sure that the website stays online. And then there's moderation. We want to make sure that with the more users coming on and the reports that are being reported, that we have 24-hour global coverage and that we're still getting back to these reports in a timely manner. And so those two areas, I think, are the ones that we want to make sure hold strong. And that's where a lot of the attention from the team is going is most of the engineers have dropped all the new features that we were building and just focused on infrastructure and keeping the site online. And then when it comes to moderation, we're working with folks to bring on many more moderators to make sure that we're getting through reports within 24 hours.
Now, that's one thing that I know users who are leaving Twitter, now called X, for various reasons. They could go to any other platform if they wanted to, Mastodon, Truth Social. What makes Blue Sky a silver lining for them?
I love this question. We get it a lot because a lot of people think we're just like Twitter. And so they're like, well, what's the difference? And I think in short, on Bluesky, you get to interact with real people and have fun conversations. And why is that happening on Bluesky and not happening on X? It's because on X, we're used to being trapped in one algorithm controlled by a small group of people. And that algorithm will promote certain folks and not others. And that's up to the folks who control the algorithm to decide. With Bluesky, that's no longer the case. Users have built over 50,000 feeds, including, I think, like 5 cat feeds, 200 Taylor Swift feeds, and various other feeds that are organized either chronologically or based on what your followers are liking. The possibilities are endless. And so what's happening with these feeds is they provide a cozier corner to connect with other people with similar interests because there's no longer a single dominant algorithm that only promotes either the most polarizing post and or the biggest brands.
And you mentioned a little bit about these are real people, and I have to talk about bots, right? That's been a
Yeah.
concern for some people on other platforms. Have bots been an issue? And if so, how are you addressing them?
Bots are always going to be an issue, no matter what social media platform. But one of the things that I think we get to benefit from is that the Web2, the other centralized social platforms that have been around for 10, 20 years, they learned about bots as they were building, versus we were able to learn from their lessons and we've already put in technologies like HCAPTCHA, verification on text, things like that to help reduce the bot problem. And then we can also rate limit in terms of how many accounts you like. And we're seeing, for example, if there's a certain account that's liking or following other accounts at a rate that's not humanly possible, we then know it's a bot. So there's a lot that we're putting in place to ensure that we can keep the bots off the platform.
Rose, every time I ask a question, you are like prepared. Not like you, I don't know, you're prepared for this necessarily, but like it's almost like these are issues that you all were prepared for going into it. So there's not, it's just bam, right top of mind for you.
Yeah, I'm not like reading off of anything. These are the things that we're thinking about day in and day out. And to be very frank, Chris, I have 18 meetings on my calendar today, so I can't go and prep for this interview. I think these are just problems that we think about day in and day out because what we decided at Bluesky very early on is that you cannot have fun without safety. And so we've always put moderation and trust and safety as a top priority for Bluesky. And in some ways, we've almost put safety before growth. And that's quite unusual for most platforms. But I actually think that that's what's resonating with people is that they're actually having a good time.
You know, one other thing that comes to mind in terms of the growth of the platform, so many people right now are wondering about, well, how can you tell this is a legitimate account? And it's hard for me not to bring up the fact that verification has been a concern for a lot of users on different
Yeah.
platforms. You can pay for it, and technically you have that check, and people can think you're legitimate, I guess. But what Blue Sky is doing is a little bit different, and there's also a personal touch because you can connect it with your own website. Talk about that.
Yeah, thanks for bringing this up. I think we're so used to a verification system that's binary, that's controlled by, again, a small group of people deciding, oh, are you cool or high status, predetermined in some way or not? And actually, that's only two worlds, right? You either have the check mark or you don't. And so we think that this type of hierarchy, this type of status, is quite, I would say, basic, and isn't reflective of how we as people all show up, which is that we represent many parts of ourselves. And so one of the things we're really excited about is custom domains, as you mentioned. Only if you own the domain can you use that domain as a handle. That is a self-verification system that doesn't rely on us, but you as a user can go and figure out for yourself. What's also really cool about this is that um, in the future, that domain can go to a website. So imagine if you click on at newyorktimes.com within the app, and that's their handle, that immediately the New York Times homepage pops up. So that's the direction where the product is moving. And what we are excited about is what are other ways we can showcase who people are, what their interests are. And so there could be future badges and other ways to showcase some forms of verification, but it's not going to be binary. We're looking for a much more equitable system.
So I wonder because, obviously you have to own the domain name. What would happen if somebody didn't renew their domain name and they lost the rights to it? Like, what happens in that scenario?
That's between them and their domain registrar. But that's basically what it is like, at platforms, we're so used to the running to a platform so that we can reserve a handle. That whole action means that you don't own your identity. It's owned by the platform. So remember when Twitter changed from Twitter to X, I believe that they just took whoever used to own X, the account, and just took it away from them without even asking. And that itself, like that, we want to prevent that system from happening. We could never do that to your domain unless you forgot to pay for it. But that's a little bit more within your control.
And that makes sense. I haven't made at chrislovingood.com just yet because I'm going through a website rework myself, but I do intend on tethering that in that regard. So someone asked me about Blue Sky and they said, I haven't used it because I don't know what it is. If you had to explain to someone who is aware of Blue Sky, but they haven't used it, how would you describe it to them?
Yeah, great question. I would say that Bluesky is basically a place for you to have conversations and make friends. It's basically these cozy corners that is created by users, and it's some combination of like a subreddit and Twitter interaction model where you can post things that are interesting to you, but rather than posting into the ether, into a global feed, you get to post into different communities. And then because there are these cozier corners, you're actually getting to meet people. And so then the algorithm isn't necessarily controlled by one person, or it can be chronological. So it's a lot easier to discover others.
And one thing that I think is interesting, because when I first saw the login page, when I finally got my invite, I was like, huh, you can choose a custom host. So you can actually make your own server and like host your own thing, right? Talk about that.
Yeah, so for most users, they probably will just use the Bluesky app. But if you want to do something that's totally different, so for example, um, we don't have a likes tab. Like you can't see all the likes that you made in Bluesky. And so there was an engineer who was like, I really want that feature. And so they created Gray Sky, which is basically a different Bluesky. And Bluesky is open source, so we published our code. It's online. Anyone can copy and paste it. And so Gray Sky was just a different client that was built on top of our protocol. And Gray Sky then showcases likes because all our data is public. And so they chose to index that data. And so that's what's so cool about Bluesky for developers is that if you like a different experience, you want a different experience, our data is completely open. There's a fire hose you just plug into and you can go build whatever experience you want.
It's hard for me not to make this comparison, but the fact that you have so many users involved with this process, it's not beholden to just one small group, as you had mentioned. It's decentralized.
I think the way I like to talk about it is Bluesky is more of like a democratic republic in
Mm.
the way that it works in terms of governance, where it's like you don't have to petition, one government to do something. You can go and set up local institutions, local laws. That's what we have with our moderation labelers. And you can go make those decisions at a local level. And then our terms of service community guidelines is more like the Supreme Court. And so at that level, we don't tolerate hate speech, we don't tolerate misinformation. But then there's a bunch of things that diverse communities care about that most platforms don't even think about, like rudeness or movie spoilers or people who are scared of spiders, right? Like there's so many other instances where you want to hide certain types of posts or certain types of accounts. And those are the tools that we've given folks that they can go and govern their own space.
I can tell you right now, I hate spoilers, just putting it out there. So that you're targeting me in that regard. You mentioned a little bit about hate speech, not tolerating it. Has Blue Sky experienced that during its inception, and how, if so, how have you been able to crack down on that?
Yeah. You know, there's hate speech is one of those things where there's like what I would say is there's always bad actors, but in most cases, most people aren't trying to be rude. It's that essentially there's not enough context on who a person is. You don't see their micro expressions. You don't understand where they came from. You don't know who they are. And so there's a lot less context on a person that then leads people to make um, fast judgments about each other in a way that they probably wouldn't do offline. And so we take a lot of inspiration from how people interact, how communities interact offline, and think about how that should look online. And so a lot of hate speech is either a culture of hate speech that has been promoted by the algorithm, right? If the algorithm continues to promote the most polarizing post, and those are the posts that get the most engagement, then the whole culture or the norms of the platform are let's do more of that because I'm getting rewarded for it.
Well, and I've already seen people create full block lists. Like you can subscribe to this block list, and it's like these are people that we believe are, negative or spreading toxicity. You can look in the list yourself, but people are already starting to like self-govern, as you were just talking about.
Yeah. And so we have a second chance. And I think starting over, users have learned, hey, we don't want to repeat the same mistakes as we did in the first wave of social media. And so what we have, I call them our Blue Sky elders. This was our users call, but our evangelists who've been with us for almost a year now. These were our beta users, and there's millions of them, and they have helped set up this much nicer culture on Blue Sky. And so part of it is our terms of service, the product, helping reduce toxicity by like allowing people to remove, their post from quote posts. Things like those mechanisms really help reduce toxicity, but it's also a lot of the norm setting that the population on Bluesky helps with. And so we very much rely on users, rely on our community to help educate new users. Like, hey, this comment is just like not cool here on Bluesky. And that type of interaction model is really helping Bluesky become a much friendlier place. And so for us, we know that we want to pull all those levers and not just try to solve problems through technology.
So basically making sure so the users who've been there for a while help the new ones come into the fold, understand the culture and understand the vibe of Bluesky.
Yeah. I think it's like community building offline. Like if you start a community with 200 people on day one, it's really hard to do norm setting and it's unclear what the culture is. Communities need to be nurtured. I think that you have to have a really strong, small group of folks who are your like centerpieces of the community who espouse what the community wants and then grow it slowly that way. And I think we were able to do that with invite codes and nurture the community first. And then as it was growing, then these evangelists or Bluesky elders were able to continue to teach the norms and the culture for new users.
I wonder, and this is just because I'm a journalist, I've seen so much mis and disinformation that has spread on social media, whether it's X or other platforms, Spill, what have you, Facebook. Is this another part where users kind of come in and, kind of flag something as, hey, that's not accurate, or hey, this doesn't have the right context for what you're sharing?
Yeah, I love that question. So we have many layers for moderation. So one, we hired over Aaron Rodericks, who used to be the head of election integrity at Twitter under Jack Dorsey. And now he leads trust and safety here at Bluesky. So one, I think it's important that you have someone really experienced who can write the policies for the network. Then on top of that, we've given tools to users to then help self-govern the network themselves. And so you can label posts and accounts as rude, for example. And so rudeness doesn't necessarily go against terms of service or community guidelines, right? Those people are allowed to continue that behavior. But on Bluesky, there's actual external consequences. People see your post as rude. People see your account as labeled as rude. And that encourages people to probably not do that next time. And so it's this type of like tools that are enabling others that they have control over that I think really allows the network to thrive. And then it's not just like rudeness posts, but it's a lot of the other basically, like we can rely on organizations like PolitiFact or other folks who are experienced in misinformation, and they can go run a labeler themselves. And so we don't have to rely on our own expertise. Our goal is, hey, can we do it with a whole community?
I was just gonna say, it sounds like you folks are really trying to bring people into the fold to not make this Bluesky corporate responsibility, but hey, this is an everyone thing. The organization is us. We are Bluesky.
I've always said Bluesky is being built for the people by the people. And that is a fundamental value to our protocol is anything we build, anyone else can build, and users get to vote with their feet.
I did see your video you posted the other day where you said freedom of choice, and that's really resonating with a lot of the things you have said today. So in terms of new features, obviously, still kind of growing the platform a little bit. What are the most requested features right now you would say that you're hearing at Bluesky?
Yeah, I will say that we have been working on new features and then had to pause last week because of all the growth. But we do know that users really want bookmarks. The number of pins I've seen in the platform. We apologize. There's actually a feed just for that now. And then there's trending topics that has been highly requested by folks. Right now, we said that there are about 50,000 feeds that were created by users. The amazing thing about the 50,000 feeds is that they were created on a separate platform that was built by a different developer who's not a part of Bluesky. And so we're hoping to bring in a feed builder into the Bluesky app. So there's all of these features that we've seen arise from the community. And that's oftentimes how we get inspiration is we see what is actually happening, and then we amplify those efforts rather than try to force a new behavior that hasn't happened on the app.
You with this platform, obviously people are still learning about it, new users popping up every day. For the new people who are just they got in, they're trying to get their bearings, so to speak, what would you say to them?
What I would say is Bluesky's a really friendly place. I would kind of take away all your past concerns about getting dogpiled or writing something and then getting people who say mean things to you, because that's almost the opposite of what's happening on Blue Sky. Is that as soon as you start responding, I would start with responding to other users or looking at other feeds that you can find people with similar interests, and immediately you'll find friends. And that's what makes the experience actually fun again. I think a lot of people focus on the product or the technology, but the way I really think about it is we're just a place that enables people to make internet friends again. And so how can we help you find others who are similar? And that's our main goal.
Now we are in the age of AI, obviously. Blue Sky made a post very much the other day talking about you've heard the concerns from artists, and right now, you're using AI mostly on the back end of things, kind of working internally, but not to train people's content. Why did Blue Sky decide to take that stance after hearing that feedback?
Yeah, great question. Our goal as a company has never been to build Gen AI. That's not really our directive. Our directive is let's open social up. Let's make social a lot more healthy. And so it's just like not at all a part of our directive. And our number one priority is serving the end user. It's not, we don't serve brands, we don't serve celebs. We all think that they're great and they're all part of the ecosystem, but brands and celebs and influencers are here because they want to reach users. And so what we're hearing from users is don't train on my data. And we're saying we're not. We have no reason to train on your data. That said, the data is public and it's much like Reddit. And so it's out there. Others can train on it, but we won't.
And as you mentioned, the whole platform's open source. Like that's how you built it, and it's available for anyone to take. Yeah.
Yeah.
We talked about AI. We talked about that there. Okay, so I want to talk about you because I looked at your LinkedIn profile. You went from blue sky consultant to strategy, operations, and growth to full-time COO. Why did you stay with Blue Sky?
I didn't prep for questions about myself. um, the thing about how I make decisions is that I've always made decisions about who I work with. It's all about the people for me. And this is one of the most amazing, talented teams I've ever worked with. And when I say amazing, I don't just mean like, oh, they're so smart, they're so good at their jobs, which is true. 20 of us are holding up 20 million folks on Blue Sky. But it's actually that it's like extremely warm and integritous. And I think it's really hard to find a group that gels so well together. And so for me, it was, I want to keep working with this team. And I think that it's with this small group of people who we can make a big difference in the world. I always believe that it's a small group of people who make history and it's not about one person. And I think that our team very much shows that.
Well, even in the video that I saw on your profile and the way this entire interview, your voice, your tone, the way you're speaking about it, you just seem like you believe so much in what you're doing on this platform.
I will say that at 3 a.m., it really helps that you believe in what you're doing. And I've always made those decisions to do what feels right, even if it goes against the grain or what society says you should do. Like I got into Harvard Business School. I chose not to go. I was able to work at Amazon and all these other big companies, but I chose not to go there. And I continue to just work on missions and startups that I really believe in. And so, is it a risk? Absolutely. But is my heart full? Is my life full? Also, absolutely.
All right. So I've asked all my questions in regard to Blue Sky. Do you have any particular questions or anything you wanted to address that I didn't already ask you about?
Maybe we can talk about some of the people who are on Blue Sky.
Well, I could tell you LeVar Burton's on Blue Sky. I just saw he popped up on there. Flavor Flav apparently is like an ambassador for celebs, I guess.
Flavor Flav has been the most amazing Blue Sky advocate. I think one of our engineers ended up teaching him about DNS, domain name systems, and then he created a starter pack that he maintains daily. And so we're just so proud of Flavor Flav for catching on to all our core features and him actually playing around with it and educating other users. So yeah, it's pretty cool to see.
Advertising. I noticed there's no advertising on that platform. I've been hit with that, inundated with it on other platforms. What's the deal with ads? Are we going to see them eventually or what?
Yeah, so the way that advertising works is it's the selling of private data, right? It's companies saying, "Hey, we know what this user likes, what times they come to the app, what region they're in, etc." And then they take that data and they sell it to brands so that brands can target users better. Because Bluesky is open and public, that was an explicit choice we made where we cannot sell the data because it's open and public. And so advertising the way that we're used to does not work on Bluesky. And so it's not a monetization model we're pursuing now. In the future, there's maybe some form of advertising that's more similar to how advertising works on the web. It's intent based. Um, but we're just so far away from that. And basically, the whole point of Bluesky is freedom of exit. So if we stuff your experience with ads and you hate it, you can leave really easily. That's basically what's happening with Google search, for example, right now. There's so many ads and people don't like Google search as much. People are using ChatGPT now. People are using DuckDuckGo. And so essentially, that is the competition that arises when people can leave. And that's what we want to build on social is you're not trapped in a platform. You can take all your followers, all your posts with you if you think the experience we're giving you and the service we're giving you is subpar. Monetization is one of those things where if you look at most social companies, they don't monetize the first few years because the most important thing is that people are having fun, that they're engaged. And then further down, then what we believe is that we want to see where people are actually seeing value in the experience. So custom domains, for example, people are actually buying domains. So then we started partnering with Namecheap to sell those domains. And so those are ways in which we want to monetize, which is, hey, this is a way that's already happening on the app. We just want to amplify it. And so down the line, I think there's probably ways in which we know that creators, developers, community builders are getting paid on Patreon and Ko-fi. And so then maybe we'll build our own payment system where then we'll take a cut of the transaction, but then people can pay each other on Bluesky with our payment system.
And before I conclude this interview, any exclusives you can drop to me? Anything that you haven't told anyone else that I can report? Anything?
Um, Honestly, no exclusives because if they're happening, they're even happening in ways that I don't know because I'm in meetings all day.
So I want to ask you questions about just I like to end it with a little, easy vibe there. What's your favorite food?
Huh. The first thing that came to mind was pizza, but I'm lactose intolerant, which is this is yeah the economy of my life, the irony.
You're playing a dangerous game like in
I know.
pizza with lactose intolerance. What TV shows, movies are you following right now?
Uh, I read James Clavell's Shogun. It's like one of my favorite books, and the show is phenomenal.
I have to make sure I finish that. I started it, so much TV going on, but I do plan on going back to that one. And then lastly, what hobby are you engaged in when you're not being the COO of Bluesky?
So funny. This year I've dabbled in so many. So I love running, I do meditation, but there's all these like new hobbies that I'm liking to pick up. I bought rollerblades recently. Uh, so we're gonna see how that goes. I also have knee pads and everything else, but yeah, I think we should always be playing and having fun, and that's where like a lot of the generation and creativity comes from.
Rose Wang, Chief Operating Officer of Bluesky. Thank you so much for making time to chat about this.
Thank you so much, Chris.